Welcome, everyone, to this bonus edition for the EMS Leadership Summit. We'd like to bring you some information about the FirstNet Authority, and who better than Ryan Fields. Ryan is the Director of Public Safety Strategies. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Robbie.
Yeah, if you could tell our people who are tuning in a little bit about yourself and about FirstNet in general, since it is a pretty new concept.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the time. Thank you all for joining. FirstNet has really been around since 2012. We'll be going through some of the details of how that came about, but this will be a good primer and precursor to give you a ballpark appreciation for what FirstNet, both the authority as well as the private partnership component FirstNet from AT&T is providing for you. So as Robbie, as you said, my name is Ryan Fields. I'm the Director of Public Safety Strategy and Policy for FirstNet with AT&T, and we are the ones that are building out the FirstNet platform throughout the country. My background, I am born and raised in the Denver, Colorado metro area, and have been a firefighter and a paramedic for about 17 years now. I spent 10 years with the Aurora, Colorado Fire Department, and served as both a firefighter, lieutenant, and a captain with them, of course, as a paramedic throughout, and then 3 years in the Office of Emergency Management for the city of Aurora. So joined the AT&T effort for FirstNet as we were beginning to build that out in 2017, and started from there. Really what this all started off with was discussion on spectrum. So those of you that have been active in the land mobile radio community and have an appreciation for the spectrum that we speak on a given daily or momentary basis, there's a lot of different things that go along with that, right? So you've got a significant amount of radio spectrum that runs the gamut from very low frequency all the way up to cosmic ray, which of course I would never want to be near, right? But we really operate on that radio spectrum on a daily basis. The challenge is there are so many different types of spectrum that we use in public safety, from extremely low frequency, ultra low frequency, all the way up to the VHF and the UHF different frequencies. But each of those can't talk to one another. If you have a UHF radio and it doesn't have the bands and the capability to talk on a ultra high frequency radio, you won't be able to talk to the person that you're trying to communicate with. Add to it, there's a multitude of different devices and radios and capabilities for us to communicate out there. One radio made by one manufacturer likely will not work with another manufacturer. So that creates challenges, right? As we're responding to scene, we won't have the capability to communicate with one another because we're operating on different radios unless you have some of those things built in. And then of course you add to it, right? We've got multiple different players, especially during these large incidents that we are working on where everybody's coming to the scene and they're all using different radio frequencies, different types of radios, and they don't interoperate with one another. So local police won't be able to talk with any of the federal agencies potentially that are coming on, or state patrol, or what have you. So those are all some of the challenges that we face. You add all that up, there are 10,000 separate incompatible and often proprietary radio networks across the US today. 10,000 networks causes a lot of challenge for us to try to communicate, especially in the day and age where we're having mutual aid and multitude of agencies that are coming to our scenes all the time. So that brings about a lot of the challenge to this process. Add to it, we in public safety have been basically working on World War II technology up to and until today to be able to facilitate that communication. So all of those multitude of factors are really setting up a perfect storm for communications challenges for us. All this came to a head, unfortunately, on September 11, 2001. Once the towers were hit by those two planes, you had firefighters that were going up that second tower looking to evacuate people out of that building, but they didn't have any realization that the first tower had already come down. So you had a helicopter pilot that was circling the area, screaming on the radio to say, get those people, the firefighters and the responders, out of that second tower, get them out as quickly as possible. But they couldn't communicate. They had those same interoperability challenges. and they were not able to facilitate that evacuation. The 9/11 Commission report came out soon after that, and basically they said we need, as public safety, our own dedicated public safety network where everything works together so we can all communicate in basically one single fashion without all these multitude of challenges. So that really sparked up the FirstNet approach in the legislation and all of that, which we will talk about here moving forward. But before we delve too much more into FirstNet, I really want to take a step back and talk a little bit more about the state of our community, our being police, fire, EMS, the challenges that we face on a daily basis, the challenges that you all continue facing on a daily basis, to really talk about how our communications can be improved as we move forward on a multitude of fronts. So I like to break things up in threes. I'm a simple guy. So the first kind of component I want to talk about today is 3 points of focus that we have when we are responding to an emergency. So those of you that are on the fire side of things as well, I'll speak to a little bit of that. But basically, when we talk about responding to an incident itself, the first point of focus that we have is what we call a task focus. Oftentimes it's task saturated focus, right? So if you are an EMT basic and you just got your IV certification, you are naturally focused on that task at hand when you're starting that IV, right? So getting everything you need ready, finding the vein, getting that inserted, keeping it from bleeding out all over the ambulance, all those different things. You're not necessarily focused on where the ambulance is driving. You're not focused on what's happening 5 to 10 feet away from you. Same as a firefighter, a newly minted firefighter just out of the academy that's on their first fire. They're on the nozzle inside. They're not focused on any collapse potential. They're not focused on what the smoke is doing. They're focused on getting water on that fire. So they're saturated in the task at hand. Step back a little bit farther from there, you've got what we call tactical approach or a tactical appreciation on an incident, right? So that would be the lieutenant or the captain that is in charge of that firefighter that is about 6 to 10 feet back, that is looking both for where the water's going, but also for any smoke or rollover coming over their head, collapse potential, any potential victims that need to be found. This also could be the paramedic that is assigned off getting that IV started, but they're doing the full assessment of the patient. So they're looking from a tactical perspective, how are we going to manage these things? On a fire scene, you've got multiple tacticians working at the same time, right? So you've got inside attack for water, you've got search and rescue, you've got probably a vent crew on the roof, and then you have an outside crew that's securing the building, right? All of those agencies are tactically focused to bring about their specific task goals. Step back a little bit farther, that would be a strategic approach to an emergency, right? So you've got the chief that's at that structure fire. They are back looking at the major strategy to bring this fire under control, and they are assigning the different tactics to do so. If you're running a cardiac arrest for your patient, you've got multiple people that are working for you, right? So you've got one person that's starting an IV, you've got one person that's doing airway, you've got another person that is pulling your meds for you, and one person's doing compressions, if you're lucky enough to have that many people, right? You can stand back and strategically decide how you want this incident to go. And so that's a good approach, and that's how we function on a daily basis. Again, just a good review for that. The second component that I really want to talk about, again, just bringing back some background for this, are 3 problems that we all face in public safety on a daily basis, right? The first problem is a simple problem. Simple problems would be something similar to following a recipe. So if you can pull a recipe out and see how to make cookies and follow it step by step, that's pretty simple. You can be able to pull that out, hopefully without burning the cookies, right? Same with that new EMT who's starting the IV. They go through their NREMT checklist and they find all the steps to start an IV. They find all the steps to insert an NPA or an OPA. All of those different components they follow in line. Very simple, very easy to do. And we do those kind of things all the time, every single day. The second problem that I'd like to talk about are what we call complicated problems, right? So a complicated problem in this scenario is, hey, back in the 60s, we went to the moon, and that was really, really tough. But the physics haven't changed, right? If we wanted to deliver the funding as the US government to get to the moon in, say, 2 years, we could do it pretty much no problem. It'd be complicated, but the physics of the challenge have not changed, and we would just basically replicate what we have done in the past with what we know today. The third type of problem, and this is the crux of the entire issue as we bring it back to how public safety works. That type of problem is what I call a complex problem, right? So you've got this cute little kiddo right here. Any of you that are listening today that have kids know that I understand what this face is, right? This face right here is the feed me, change me, and put me down for a nap or we're gonna have problems face, right? So this is my son when he was about 3 months old. I had that figured out, right? I knew exactly when I saw that face how to keep him from ruining our afternoon, and we would take care of that. The challenge comes when we go and we try to bring in a second kiddo into the mix, right? So we decided, my wife and I, let's have a second kid. Let's go ahead and work through the process of moving forward through this. And I'm thinking, you know what? This is going to be perfect, right? We're going to have that second kiddo. Everything that worked with the first one will absolutely work with the second one, right? When they're crying, when they're looking like what that first one used to do, and I would change them and I'd feed them and I'd put them down for the nap, all that's going to work fine. Those of you that are listening today that have multiple kids know that that is absolutely not the case, right? Because that kiddo will not react and be soothed in the same way based on what you had learned from the first time. So this is a complex problem, right? And no matter what we try to do from a public safety perspective when we're addressing complex problems, we're not going to be able to learn from what we've done in the past as much because there's a dynamic there. Bring it out to an active shooter incident, right? So you have a human actor that has been learning from all of the previous active shooter incidents before him or her, and they are learning of what they should and should not do to make our job in public safety harder when it comes to responding to that incident. So the physics are changing. Those complex problems bring about a necessity for us to adapt and be much more quick on our feet as we're dealing with things like this. The third chunk that I want to talk about quickly are the different types of emergencies that we in public safety face on a daily basis, right? The first would be pretty much a police or law enforcement only type of emergency. So these are the events where, you know, it's a robbery, it's a traffic stop, it's an investigation. Police are in charge. They don't need us, as in fire or EMS, necessarily coming into their scene. They definitely don't want us messing with the evidence that would be at a scene specifically. So these are police only events. Second type of event would be an EMS or fire only event, right? When we're called to a cardiac arrest or when we are called to a structure fire, something to that effect, we are in charge and we manage that event, and we don't necessarily all the time need for law enforcement or other agencies to come into the scene in particular as well, right? So there's the police only event, there's a fire only event, and really where all this comes to a head is when we combine all of the agencies into a single geographic location, and we have both the police, fire, and EMS event where all of us are responding at the same time. So an active shooter is a perfect example of that, right? We're all used to playing in our sandbox by and large, but when we're all forced into the same sandbox at the same time under a complex emergency, we're having to do task, tactic, and strategic activity all in the same place under a unified command, the challenges of communication become exponentially greater as a result of that. So what does that look like, right? From a small scale, complex emergency perspective, this is something that you and I have probably faced any given Saturday night in our town, right? We all know that bar or that place where when we get called to it at 2:30 in the morning on a Saturday night, we know it's not going to be a good call. We get called, in this case, 911 says we need to respond to an unconscious, unresponsive, 6'7", 400-pound male in the bathroom of this bar. So what's going to happen, right? You're going to get police. They're definitely coming because they know bad things happen in this bar. Fire likely is going to come help. If you're not an EMS fire department, they'll come to help you lift. And then you're going to have EMS coming in place. So you get to the scene and you find your patients, and they have pinpoint pupils, decreased respirations. They are looking pretty bad, right? And you're thinking on your assessments, gosh, well, what's wrong with this person? Likely they're having a narcotic overdose, right? So if they're having a heroin overdose, what's the drug that we're going to get them breathing again? Narcan. But let's say you have a brand new out of school paramedic that's really going gusto for this, right? They haven't seen the challenges that happen when you have patients like this. So he gets onto the scene and says, you know what? I got this. we need Narcan, we're having a narcotic overdose. Let's go ahead and start that IV, and let's give this guy 4 milligrams of Narcan. He's huge, right? Let's just shove this into his arm right away, and we're going to fix this problem. Those of you that are hearing this, shaking your head, would be thinking, don't do that, right? Because this guy is going to wake up and he's going to be incredibly mad at anybody that's looking at him because we have ruined his high, and he's going to come up swinging. The challenge you're going to have with that is now law enforcement is looking at this massive guy bearing down on them. What are they going to do? Necessarily, they're going to take him down by force because they see a threat in front of them. Pivot a little bit to an incident where that paramedic would say, listen, everybody, I'm going to give this patient a medication called Narcan. He's having a heroin overdose. He is going to be very unhappy when we give him this medication, but he's not fighting you. He is fighting the fact that he is having a medical problem, and we're bringing him out of that overdose situation. So keep that in mind when he starts swinging. Everybody there in that 30 seconds that I just spent talking about the situation now have an appreciation for what's going on, and we're all working together on the same sheet of music. Not to mention he could maybe just give him 1.5 milligrams of Narcan and just get him breathing again, right? But that's a different story. So that's a small scale complex emergency. If you run something like that and you can work on communication in that unified command environment on a microcosm scale, we can scale that up a little bit bigger. We're talking about the small wheel with those small scale incidents. The wheel just gets bigger when we have larger and larger incidents. So a large scale complex emergency is another good example, right? Unfortunately, I have to change the slide. It seems like unfortunately well too readily, but you know, you've got Texas, you've got Florida, you've got Las Vegas, all of these massive active shooter events. The process that happened in that bar bathroom really is similar. That wheel just gets bigger, and we're adding more people to the mix and having to facilitate that conversation on a larger scale. I mentioned briefly that I was with the City of Aurora Fire Department, and back in 2012, you may remember we had the Aurora Theater shooting for the Batman movie. So just kind of a quick synopsis of what we had there. Basically, 3 specific theaters were open for the opening of Dark Knight Rises, the movie, that Thursday evening. And the shooter was in the middle theater and came in, and within the span of about 29 seconds, he let out 90 shots with his automatic weapon into the theater and then into the adjoining theaters as well, and then continued from there. In total, 12 people perished during that incident, and we had 72 others that were injured. But the challenge that you have with something like that is 1,400 people all seeing this happening. They pull the fire alarm, and all of them get up and start streaming out of the theater itself. What are most of them doing? They're either calling 911, or if this happens in this day and age, they're getting on Snapchat, they're getting on Facebook Live, they're getting on YouTube Live, and they are streaming live the event as it is happening. What's going to happen to the cellular macro network when all of those people immediately jump on and start using all that bandwidth? It's going to necessarily degrade the capabilities and availability of that network for the responders that are coming into the scene that need to be able to use it. So that's a real appreciation for how FirstNet will help, and which we'll get into a little bit more. But what happened in Aurora specifically? As all those 1,400 people are streaming out, they're getting on their cell phones, they're calling 911, and they get to our dispatch center, which is a large room, probably about 200 feet across by maybe 50 feet wide. And it's just like any dispatch center. So you've got a group of call takers that take the 911 calls, and they triage it and they kick it over to the police dispatcher or the fire dispatcher. In this case, they sent their request over to both sides, but they had only started to get a small piece of the picture. One party shot at the movie theater in Aurora. That unfortunately happens quite a bit in the city of Aurora on the weekend. So that's nothing out of the ordinary. Fire department gets their dispatch, they send an engine, they send a truck, they send a chief and 1 ambulance, and they start headed to the scene. Police get their dispatch, they're very close by, and they get to the scene and they see that this is the largest mass shooting to date in the country, and they start calling for help. Fire is necessarily behind the 8 ball because they don't have an appreciation for what they're coming into, and they also can't access the scene very well and find the police commander because there are 1,400 people that are streaming out of a parking lot. Add to it, you've got the only communications capability between the police dispatcher and the fire dispatcher is typing into the CAD system so they can get the information up on a screen, or talking into an intercom so that they can talk across the room to each other. With hundreds of 911 calls coming in all at the same time, you can imagine how that game of telephone, from police saying, "Send me more resources," to fire getting that message, was convoluted a little bit. So those were a lot of the challenges that we faced, but it wasn't necessarily a problem on the responder side. It was the technology that they had available to them that caused them some issues. So what went well? What went well during that event? Three things went absolutely fantastically. From a task perspective, all of the responders on that scene, from police, fire, and EMS, did an incredible job. They stopped the bleeding, they extricated, triaged, treated, and transported those patients incredibly well from the task side of things. From a tactical side, all of the lieutenants and captains that showed up on the apparatus did their job that they were assigned to do very well, both on the police as well as the fire side. And then step back from the strategic side, we had our fire commander managing that extrication, triage, treatment, transport of all of those patients incredibly well. And then you had the law enforcement officer in charge managing his component of that response. But they weren't together, right? Add to it, they couldn't talk to each other on the radio. So we're basically running two separate incidents in the same geographic sandbox, not being able to communicate with one another about what we're doing. So it's the largest problem that we have. And those of you that have run large incidents or even small incidents in the past can agree to this needs work component, right? So what needed work during this incident primarily was the communications capabilities, both in dispatch as well as on scene. Three things specifically were called out as a result of this. Those of you that have read any type of after-action report, this will look pretty familiar, right? Police and fire commanders did not establish a unified command, and we talked about why that was difficult. Police department was unable to or did not know how to communicate directly with the fire department because they didn't have the technological capability to do so. And police and fire personnel did not participate in regular communications or interoperability drills. All the challenges that we all face on a daily basis. So moving forward, how can FirstNet, as we are starting to build this out today, really improve upon the capabilities that we are talking about? And FirstNet brings about a number of factors that we'll talk about here quickly that can help improve upon that type of response in the future, both from a communications, setting up a unified command perspective, as well as call taking, and most importantly, situational awareness. FirstNet, built with AT&T, is a dedicated platform that EMS, fire, and police can truly depend on. And it has been purpose-built for you from all of the different components that were drafted when the legislation was being built. So this is a kind of a small slide, but you can see here that in March 2010, the FCC said, all right, we're going to move forward with building out the FirstNet network. And that started out the process of going to Congress. And all of us in public safety lobbying Congress and saying, give us our own dedicated public safety broadband network that we can move forward with. February 2012, that was passed in Congress, and it allocated the FirstNet.gov, so the federal side of the FirstNet Authority, to begin the process of building this out. Initially, it was supposed to be a greenfield, what they call a greenfield build out, but that would necessarily mean building out towers across the entire country that would be dedicated to public safety. There simply was not enough money in the funding for this bill in order to facilitate that. So the FirstNet Authority looked for partners in the private sector to help them in building this out. Interestingly enough, AT&T was the only nationwide commercial wireless carrier that even decided to put in a bid for this effort. And we won that bid in March of 2017. And in December of 2017, all states signed on to say, yes, we want FirstNet to be our public safety network of choice. And then moving on to today, you are not, as an agency, required to sign on to FirstNet at all. And they drafted that in the legislation because it is something where you have the choice, and it necessarily brings competition into the mix to choose what presence and what carrier is most important to you. But now you have basically 5 major carriers in the country. You have the Sprint, T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, and FirstNet is now the 5th major carrier because it is completely isolated and completely dedicated to only you in public safety. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So as you can see, again, a quick review of FirstNet is the nationwide public safety broadband network service for services and solutions that are dedicated to first responders and those that support them. So it really is that focused approach. Who can get on FirstNet? So there are primary agencies. These are the ones that get all the benefits that I'm going to talk about all the time, no matter what. So anybody that is fire, law enforcement, EMS, public safety answering points, or 911 centers, or emergency management are considered primary customers. From there, we always rely on extended primary customers to come in and assist us, right? So whether it's the utility company, whether it is the water department, or even public works, we want them to come in and assist us. So they are also FirstNet customers. They're called extended primary, and we can literally uplift them during an incident so they can have the same priority and preemption and services that we enjoy. So here are some of the core components of what FirstNet offers: security, coverage, devices, control, and innovation. From a security perspective, anytime your FirstNet device goes out to the cell tower, and as soon as it attaches to that cell tower, it is completely isolated off and gets routed to a physically separate core network that is one of the most secure communications networks in the country outside of the DoD, because it is so well locked down and it's isolated off, so it's not commingled with civilian traffic. So the security from a HIPAA compliance standpoint, from law enforcement sensitive material, all of that is isolated off and can't be accessed. So that is a huge component of the opportunities that are brought to bear from the security side of things. Coverage. We are spending $48 billion with a B over the next 25 years, with the majority of that being spent over the next 5 to increase the coverage across the nation for all of FirstNet. So if you feel like you don't have great service right now, potentially in the past with AT&T service, it may be worth reaching out and getting information from a solutions consultant from FirstNet to see, 1, has that improved, and 2, will that improve, because likely it will in the future as a result of this massive investment. So coverage is a huge component. In addition to that, we've been allocated a specific type of spectrum called band 14, which is very far-reaching. It's a great high-quality spectrum that is only dedicated to public safety. So all of the new devices, whether it's a new iPhone, new Samsung, new iPads, all of those devices now have band 14 radios built into them. So you're able to work and use and get that information through that dedicated spectrum. We'll talk a little bit about local control and the different components with that, as well as innovation. One of the primary and most important components of FirstNet that is above and beyond what you can get on a commercial network is what's called priority and preemption. Priority and preemption I look at as one of those big Airbus A380 jets, right? So if you take in your mind and you think of 2 of those A380 jets, one, the double-decker variant of it is the big 850-seat one, right? So they're packing as many people in as small seats as possible, and that's going to take off and start flying. If that's your network, and that's what all civilian macro LTE networks are today, as fast as that airplane goes is as fast as everybody else goes. So if it gets bogged down or loaded down and it's going slower than normal, everybody that's in that network is going slower. The FirstNet variant of that big Airbus A380 is the double-decker one that has all of the first and business class seats up on the top, right? So you and EMS are lay flat seat, first class, all the service, all the things that you need while you're in first class. So you have the best quality of service, you have the highest priority on the network, and you're able to access as much as you need from that spectrum perspective because you're in first class. All of your extended primary members, so whether it's the water department or public service or wreckers and towing, they're all seated behind you in business class. As soon as you need them, we can upgrade them directly to first class, and then they can be right in line with you. Here's where the kicker comes. As people are hopping on Snapchat, hopping on Facebook Live, and starting to degrade the network and slowing that first plane down, we, with preemption, can now take the people that are on the bottom part of that airplane. If they are starting to slow the network down, we are going to move them down to the baggage hold, meaning we're taking them off of the spectrum they're using now, sitting them on a lower spectrum, and freeing up all the rest of that spectrum for you to be able to use. If they're still bogging down the network, we'll politely give them a parachute, we'll open the door, and we'll kick them off the airplane, right? Literally, ruthless preemption means we will kick civilians off the network to make room for you so you can facilitate the communication that you have, need, and want. Of course, they can still call 911, but you have all the spectrum available to you. That's called priority and ruthless preemption. Huge opportunity that's coming out of this. Applications and solutions, the innovation of this is really impressive. When we talk about being able to develop your own application and everybody can share it, and if it's open source, you're not being charged an arm and a leg for it, you'll be able to utilize the applications that you need from an EMS perspective on this network to really move forward. So what does this look like in action? There's a few different examples of what we're looking at here. This stat, as you can see, 30% of rural patients are fatally injured in a car crash. They arrive to the hospital 60 plus minutes out, right? So the golden hour of that. That's the challenge that we have. But with FirstNet, we can now tap into the information coming out of the vehicle. Did it roll over? How many people were in the vehicle? How much fuel is in the tank? Did they have their seatbelts on? Have people been ejected? All of that information we can gather from the data that's coming out of these vehicles, these cars. And we can get that information as we're being dispatched. So we can decide, do we want to have more resources respond because there's 6 people in a car versus 1? Do we want an airborne standby of a helicopter? What are the different things that we need to do? And oh, by the way, we can take an LTE connected drone and have fly a line of sight directly to the scene and give us visual footage of what's happening before our ambulance shows up. So these kind of things will really help for us to improve upon that transport time. Every 40 seconds, an American will die of a heart attack. Well, excuse me, will have a heart attack. The MI challenges that we face as a society are continuing to grow. But the capabilities that we bring with FirstNet are, even if you're in a rural area, or maybe you only have an EMT and the paramedic is farther out, you have the capability to connect your EKG vis-a-vis FirstNet directly out to a cardiologist at the receiving facility so they can exactly see what's going on with that patient, and they can have live video footage of what that patient looks like, so they can give you real-time live doctor's consults on how we can better improve upon this patient outcome while we're transporting. And then talking about strokes. Strokes are obviously very similar to heart attacks in terms of their morbidity and mortality. The challenges that we face with strokes are great, but the technological capabilities we're bringing to bear, there are literally stroke ambulances out there that many of you may have heard of that have a CT scanner inside the ambulance. You can imagine, though, that if you're scanning someone, looking at the data, and then sending it back to a neurologist to take a look at, all of that requires a significant amount of live stream data, priority and preemption, in order to be able to make a decision on whether or not to give a clot-busting drug or whether to transport the patient because they're having an aneurysm, right? Those are the kind of challenges that we face, but the connectivity dedicated to that ambulance vis-a-vis FirstNet will really bring that about. So closing, you know, our chairman and CEO of AT&T, Randall Stevenson, said this way back before we even really started delving into FirstNet itself. He said that our network is now the critical link for all of public safety as they protect America. Our support for public safety is no longer an elective opportunity. It is an imperative obligation. That's the reason that I left the city of Aurora to help out with this FirstNet effort, because I fundamentally believe that this isn't just another business opportunity for AT&T or any other commercial wireless carrier for that matter. This is a dedication to public safety and the mission of improving upon communications for all of us in that space. So I'll leave it at that. Unfortunately, since given this process, I can't take any questions, but I do encourage you to go to firstnet.com. That will take you to the FirstNet AT&T site, or you can go to firstnet.gov. That is the government side of the site to see anything about the authority. And Robbie, I'll send it back to you. Thank you, sir.
Ryan, great. Thank you so much for that overview and your explanation and these great examples of the future of communications. So, what if you could just maybe answer a few questions around? You had mentioned I think it sounds like kind of the holy grail of interoperability. Agencies, I feel like, struggle with this. And how does Band 14? I mean, I guess how we have a lot of 911 PSAP supervisors probably watching. We talked a lot about next generation 911. How do you foresee those different platforms coming together using the Band 14? I guess what are some steps that 911 center PSAPs or people who oversee the planning of this can take to fully start to utilize the Band 14 that's available?
Yeah, so there's two components to this. The first, from a strict interoperability standpoint, Robbie, is just like you and I can talk on a cell phone if one of us are on one carrier and the other's on the other without any challenges. There have been processes in place for many years that say interoperability between LTE networks is never going to be a problem. So you don't have the challenges of device-to-device interoperability. You get the benefits of the enhanced capabilities if you join FirstNet. So you will have the black SIM that dedicates you on that separate core and all of the components to that. But really, Robbie, where this comes into play is when we can develop these applications and these push-to-talk capabilities eventually that will allow all of us to plug into the same situational awareness app. So whether it's a PSAP or police or fire, if we are all plugged into an application that gives us live video footage, specific call details, as we talked about with the vehicle, the data analytics that's coming out of a vehicle that's rolled over, and all of us can see that in one place and act upon that information in real time, the capabilities to make decisions from that tactic, strategic, and situational awareness perspective massively improve our capability to respond to that incident faster and with better information and with better resources. So that's really where this is coming into play. And Band 14 is the dedicated spectrum that you can utilize to fly through that. We call it the pipe, right? So right now, public safety has been on a pretty small pipe of data. You expand that out to a massive pipe that you can plug into and use whatever you want because it's your network.
Gotcha. Well, thanks again, Ryan. We really appreciate the explanation. It does seem like the future is very bright when it comes to the interoperability possibilities and the telecommunications opportunities that first responders listening from across this country and multiple countries right now, but from across this country are able to use in the future. So Ryan, thanks for taking the time, and we appreciate you putting this presentation together for us.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.